The war on drugs has failed. Plant medicine has absolutely saved my life. 9 years without a drop of alcohol, but more importantly for me was 8 years of not a single prescription medication. I had another run-in with law enforcement for DUI, and I decided to check myself into rehab the following day. I would have saved myself so much heartache. I didn't start using plant medicine until I was 35 years old. We were lied to about plant medicine. I think there's a lot of people out there that are struggling, and I think if we all come together, we can really start changing policy, and we can really start changing even suicide numbers as well. My name is Rick Glass. I'm happy to be here representing CannaCares. I'm the only in Carroll County, Maryland, who's focusing on cannabis education. Just really happy to be here with the Trauma Recovery Alliance, focusing on plant medicine. Plant medicine has absolutely saved my life. A lot of people already know my story, but for people who are kind of turning in for the first time, I graduated from high school in 2001 and then joined the Marine Corps. I was actually in boot camp in 9/11 when the Marine Corps happened, so I really didn't know what I was getting myself into. Alcohol was always a big thing in my life. I was a pretty heavy drinker even starting through high school. Started noticing becoming a little bit of a problem, but when I got back from 2 combat tours, I did 1 combat tour in 2003 and 1 in 2005. Again, not knowing what I was getting myself into prior 9/11, joining the military, was quite an eye-opening experience. After I got back from Iraq, I started noticing my drinking started looking a lot different, a lot more isolated, started drinking a lot higher volumes. Behavior started changing, started getting into some legal issues. Relationships started really deteriorating in my life. Fast forward many years, and April 19th, 2017, I had another run-in with law enforcement for DUI, and I decided to check myself into rehab the following day. And while I was in rehab, I really started to look at some other methods and some other therapies. This was my 3rd rehab facility that I was participating in, and I really wanted to change my life around. Started really looking at other options and other potential modalities and therapies, and really started looking at the cannabis plant. The cannabis plant absolutely has saved my life, really diving into it and really understanding what this plant can do for a lot of people. Again, being arrested on April 19th and checking myself into rehab the following day, and my sobriety date being 4/20 is kind of coincidental. It is part of my story, but it's a big part of my story. Every year I get to celebrate, obviously, National Cannabis Holiday, but also the date that I freed myself from the chains of alcohol. Just recently hit 9 years without a drop of alcohol, but more importantly for me was 8 years of not a single prescription medication. That's been a long road for me. I know the first year I was really trying to make some hard decisions, and I think we really need to focus on plant medicine. Plant medicine is helping so many people, and not just cannabis. We really look into some psilocybin, some other therapies that are really out there. The therapies are out there, we really just have to show some empathy and some compassion. And if we truly care about our communities, specifically our veteran communities, we know how much a lot of these different plant medicines are helping people when it comes to psilocybin, ketamine, a lot of different other therapies as well. So I think it's time we really kind of peel the curtains back and understand what this medicine all is. I've had some very intense experiences on a lot of different plant medicines. I've had intense experiences on cannabis. I've had intense experiences on psilocybin. I think that's what we really need to take a step back and focus on education. There are people in our communities who have really taken a deep dive into some of these things and really know what they're talking about. And I think it's time we kind of open up to some of them. I would love for the education to get to our doctors. That's where the education really needs to go. But until it does, we really need to lean on a lot of these people in our communities who have a lot of personal experience, who have done the work, and really understand that while these medications are very powerful, they're also very useful. But we have to understand what we're doing, and we have to use a lot of these things with intention. Microdosing, I know a lot of veterans are getting a lot of benefit from, and even macrodosing, some really intense experiences that a lot of veterans have been through, and some of those macrodose experiences are really changing their lives, sometimes 2-3 doses a year, which is a little bit different than cannabis, because cannabis is usually one of those plants that you do have to use on a daily basis. The war on drugs has failed. I think we have to really come to terms with that, especially when we look at the amount of money that's been put into it. It's completely failed. We have to understand that a lot of these medications and a lot of these plants, why were they made illegal in the first place? And I think we have to really peel those curtains back too and start looking at some motives, even with big pharma. So absolutely, I think we really need to look at policy. We really need to look at some serious policy changes when it comes to looking at a lot of these plants. I think my life would have been completely shifted if I would have had access to a lot of these plants and even the education of them. A lot of people buying weed from their guy back in the day. And I think we have the ability now to really look into our cannabis and what's actually in this and talk about terpene profiles and talk about grow processes and how things are naturally produced. But I would have saved myself so much heartache. I didn't start using plant medicine until I was 35 years old. I went down the medication route, tried a lot of different therapies, and I just didn't really find a whole lot of success in a lot of those. And I would have saved myself a whole lot of heartache. I always had the mentality of cannabis makes you fat, stupid, and lazy. And I just really bothers me a little bit of all those years that I've put myself through a lot of heartache when I really would have reduced that judgment and really looked at this plant for what it is. And I probably would have kept a lot of relations in my life, and I'd probably be a lot of different places. I think pride is a very big issue with veterans. I think we're bred to deal with pain, whether that be physical pain or emotional pain. And I think we have to understand that there's a lot of community services out there that are really helping a lot of people, including community services that focus on plant medicine. But I think a lot of veterans suffer in silence because they feel like they're weak if they ask for help, and I think that's the exact opposite. I think there's a lot of people out there that are struggling, and I think if we all come together, we can really start changing policy, and we can really start changing even suicide numbers as well. I think everybody thinks it's about getting high. I see this really big differentiation between medical cannabis and recreational cannabis, which I personally don't agree with. It's all about intention. The medicine is inside of the cannabis. The medicine is not with the holding of a medical cannabis card. The same ingredients that a recreational consumer would be ingesting would potentially be the same ingredients that a medical consumer would be ingesting. Even a recreational consumer, if they're saying I'm just using it to get high, ask a couple more questions and you'll really get to the bottom of what they're actually trying to do. You really have to say, what does it do for you? And say, it helps me relax, helps me calm down, helps me sleep at night. That doesn't sound very recreational to me. That sounds like some very medical things that they're treating. So I think it's time to really stop making a big difference in just talking about the cannabis plant in general. And there's a lot of reasons and there's a lot of barriers for people not to obtain their medical cannabis card. There's policy shifts every single day, especially in the cannabis world, but I know we're seeing a lot of policy shifts with psilocybin as well. So we really have to stay up to date on a lot of those, but we're seeing those changes on a weekly basis in a positive way, but we need to make sure we're informed and we need to make sure our voices are heard as well. Often I hear the term, Rick, you've done a lot of self-medication, and it's looked in a negative way. Self-medicating saved my life. I was not advised by a physician to start using cannabis. I was advised by other veterans who had a lot of success. And I think when we're starting to decide to self-medicate, that's because there's a lack of education out there. If we had more education, then I don't think we would have to make those decisions. But the way I looked at it is I started looking at the potential of me possibly overdosing on something. I know I'm an addict. I know I have an addict brain. So I know no matter what I do, I tend to do it to the nth degree. And that's one of the reasons why I looked at cannabis, is because I know even with the irresponsible consumption of cannabis, I was not going to be able to overdose. And we could say the same thing with psilocybin. And we cannot say that about a lot of over-the-counter things that you can just buy or even pharmaceutical medication. There's a risk of overdose with some of those things, which there isn't with cannabis and a lot of other plant medicines. I think lawmakers oftentimes they just look directly at science rather than having that personal interaction. There are veterans in your community that would love to share their experience with you. And I know it's their responsibility sometimes for them to reach out to you, but they're out there. And I think hearing their story can really change a lot of people's minds. Having a little bit more of that compassion and understanding that, hey, maybe what we were taught about plant medicine was wrong. Even though plant medicine is powerful, maybe there was a reason why we were taught certain things about it. And maybe coming to the conclusion that we were lied to about plant medicine. I think it's here. I think a lot of different people are using it from all different age ranges. I see a lot of our senior community benefiting, not only from cannabis, but from some psilocybin treatment as well. So I just think it's completely crossed any type of political agendas. I think it's crossed age gaps as well. And I just think we really have to embrace plant medicine for what it is. If you're struggling with mental health, I just strongly suggest that you reach out. Reach out to anybody. Reach out to a friend. Reach out to a family member. We have access, a lot of people do have access to the internet now, and there's so many online support groups. And even I've been connected with people through Facebook, through other states and through other organizations, and having those one-on-one conversations. Sometimes that's just, it's all about resources. It's all about spreading resources. Even if you've been to therapy 3 or 4 times and it didn't work, that doesn't mean you should give up. There might be a therapist out there that that could really help you. And there might be some medicines out there that could really help you too. But I think you really have to have an open mind, and we have to stop staying stuck. And the definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And that's what I was going through. And that's why I decided that I was going to really look into plant medicine. So I'm not suggesting that all veterans try plant medicine. I strongly believe that cannabis is not for everybody. But I also strongly encourage people to do their own research. And I think the days of "my doctor said" should somewhat be questioned a little bit. Not all the time. It all depends on kind of what you're going through. But again, just happy to be here. I would love for you guys to give my nonprofit some support. I'm definitely trying to build it. Started it up last year, really trying to grow the website, trying to grow my advocacy. I've done some advocacy in DC, do a lot of public speaking. But CannaCaresMD.com. You can also follow me on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook, just Rick Glass, and then on Instagram, Rick Glass 420. But I would love to just connect. I would love to collaborate with anybody who's available. I really think that just spreading information and really getting the word out that plant medicines are saving people's lives. And it takes a village to really spread this message, especially with so much stigma that's out there. So I really appreciate the opportunity, and I thank you for having me.